Hello, this is Lynn Fraser with the Radical Recovery Summit. Marie and Meaghan Wright are two of the most delightful people I know. When I decided to do a theme on joy and connection, I immediately thought of them. They are identical twins. They have a production company where they do documentaries and braid people's lives and stories into those documentaries. They have some difficult personal experience in their past, and they also bring to life how we can work with that, how we can heal, how we can support each other as they did, and how we can bring that joy and connection and warm interest in other human beings to life.
The type of stuff that we do work on is, yeah, it's very much of a social lens, like social impact focus. Mostly with like queer centric, queer led, like clients, organizations. So like uplift and like hire queer people as well. Mostly like a lot of female and non-binary folks because the industry is so male dominated. But yeah, like, recently we worked on some fun gigs with like some androgynous clothing brands. This summer we worked on this like androgynous hairstyling product based out of New York. That was fun and so gay. An androgynous clothing company called Karen Finch that we did some filming for. Yeah, it was fun because like a lot of the stuff that we do, like over the years, a lot of the stuff that we do is like docu style stuff. Because like honestly, it's hard to get funding to just make documentaries full time. The starving artist mentality is kind of real. So we do like a lot of braided storytelling stuff. And we kind of combine that like documentary storytelling with social impact to kind of dip our hands into both realms. The Cody Institute right now is really cool. We're featuring three different social change leaders around the world in Ethiopia and then and potentially in Uganda and then an indigenous couple in BC. We made a feature-length documentary called The Social Shift on social entrepreneurship. And that was when we were literally just like starting out. But yeah, like a lot of the stuff that we've done over the last few years are like, anywhere from like working with the BIPOC community or folks with disabilities or the queer community or whatever it may be. And a lot of it is like kind of heavier topics. So it's been, and obviously like finding like the highs and lows in those stories, but it's been kind of fun more recently to just like work on some really like light and airy and fun and just really, really queer centric stuff.
So, all the travel you do, what happened with your business when COVID came along? Did it kind of grind to a halt for a while, or were you still busy?
Yeah,
Big
it
halt.
definitely. Yeah, big halt. I feel
Big
like
stop
people's
sign.
marketing. I mean, the marketing budgets in general in Nova Scotia are pretty small. Not that like our clients are only in Nova Scotia, but yeah, it was a huge halt for like at least a year. People were just trying to keep afloat. They didn't want to spend money on video stuff. But one of our first like bigger gigs, I guess, was making these training videos, these training courses for this online learning platform for social entrepreneurs. And that's actually like where we learned a lot about social enterprise and social entrepreneurship and why we got kind of passionate about that. So we give credit to that. But at the same time, like we didn't love obviously making courses
Right.
pretty much full time. So in the pandemic, it seemed like, there was for video production, at least in terms of like our scale, like there was a lot of like people doing, I don't know, like product stuff at home. But for us, like one of the opportunities was these types of courses, I guess. And Meg and I were just burnt out from making courses. So we were like, maybe we'll just take this time to like reassess and work on our business instead of just like in our business. So, but for the most part, it definitely like we lost a lot of business. Like it felt like we were kind of in standstill for a bit. And I think to this day, like there's still a bit of like lingering anxiety from the pandemic. It's like, is this ever going to happen again? Like probably. So I mean, if anything, it was a good learning for us to get our ducks in a row in terms of our finances and savings and stuff. But yeah, it definitely affected us pretty greatly, I'd say.
Hmm. And so, when you think about the kind of business that you want, the kind of films you want to do, the kind of people that you want to be involved with, do you go after people, or do they all pretty much come to you through word of mouth now?
It's mostly, I would say, word of mouth. It kind of depends. Like, we're working a lot with like tourism right now. So, like, that would be an example of like tourism, like doing things the same way all the time. And then really trying to push for more diversity in that type of content. But yeah, I feel like the Podaloos and the Barbs and like those brands are like slowly coming to us now, which is really cool. And I think too, like, yeah, like I had a call this morning with a company that basically like saves the forest. Basically, like if you own a massive land of forest in Nova Scotia and you're older and you none of your kids take it or whatever, or want to take it, then big developers and people that process forests lumber. I'm like, I have no idea how to explain it. Long story short, they try to preserve it, and like it's like kind of a nonprofit where they're essentially like stopping that from happening, of like all the clear cutting from happening. But long story short is that they reached out to us because someone on their board was like, oh, mirror image would be perfect for this. So we're definitely getting like, we're definitely known for more social environmental impact stories for sure. Like a lot of people's focus is more around money, and for us it's like it's around people and creative and yeah, just having a good time. It's interesting though, because like no matter what, like no matter, mentors that we've talked to or like podcasts or just tutorials and stuff online, like even some of the bigger players that we like idolize, like filmmakers, like everybody has a bit of that imposter syndrome. And like it's so validating to hear that because like so often like we'll look at some of our competitors, especially locally, and we'll be like, oh, should we be doing these types of working with these types of brands? Should we be doing this type of stuff? Like maybe a bit more, I don't know, commercial focus, corporate focus, but more and more we're like, no, just stick in our lane. It's worked for us. People come to us, we're getting more known for it.
Mm.
And I think too, like more and more on the East Coast, like being known as like female led, queer led, and again, like hiring crews of 5 to 10 to 15, mostly queer
Mhm.
folks in the community. I think that's becoming more known, at least in Nova Scotia, and we're getting put on people's radar because of that, which benefits us because then it's like, oh, Mirror Image Media does this type of work. They hire these type of people. This is the type of story we want to tell. So it kind of like the stars kind of align in that way.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the movie that you made about your back and about that whole community. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what happened there? And was that the first kind of big film that you did that got into film festivals and that kind of thing?
I was making just a short doc. It was like a passion project on like my individual story and how I met all these different folks who had spinal injuries because obviously I broke my neck in 2016. Little Humpty Dumpty fell down a hill. Crack bang boom. But yeah, I
I'm
guess long story
stretching
short,
as you say it.
I fractured my C1, C2, C6, C7. And like a lot of health professionals still to this day, they hear it and they're like, and you're still alive. But
You're not
anyways,
paralyzed, like you're mobile.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, well, and that's what the doctor said. It's like, the chances of breathing, let alone walking, are very slim. So yeah, so lucky to be here. Thank the Lord, thank the missus, whoever that is. Um, but
Yeah.
no, so we made this short doc based on my experience, and the reason why it kind of came to be was because I had met these handful of individuals who have spinal injuries, like I mentioned, who either reached out or I reached out to just to kind of connect with. And although, like, I obviously didn't have any neurological deficit or whatever, though I was in the hospital for like 6 weeks, and then they put me in this like halo vest for a few months. We kind of like I felt like I could really connect with these people, so I kind of wanted to like uplift their stories and then kind of through my lens of just like being like what if type thing. But yeah, there was a really great learning opportunity for me to like kind of dive into film starting out, especially when it was so personal
Mm.
and I was really passionate about it. So um yeah, looking back I cringe watching it, but I'm grateful that I made it. and definitely like learned a lot on the way. And I think honestly, it like ultimately helped heal a lot of the trauma that I had associated with the injury. Crazy, crazy world. That was a throwback.
The two of you were on The Amazing Race as well, right?
Mhm.
That was
We
crazy.
were we were racing. I don't know how amazing we were, but we were racing. I know. I actually got into a health like an osteo appointment recently. 'Cause someone was like, "Sorry, I'm booked up." Like this woman was recommended by my physio. I'm booked up, blah blah blah. And I was like, "No worries, all good. Like we did film at your clinic for this other brain injury thing, whatever." And then she was like, "Wait, were you guys the ones in the Amazing Race?" I was like, "Wow, so there's more than 13-year-olds that have seen this." Cause like Lynn, literally when we're in airports and like honestly last night at the soccer game, I'm like, there's like kids in front of us and behind and they're all just like hitting each other. Like it's really we got like halfway. It's like it's funny. People are obsessed with the show though, for sure. Um yeah, no, we applied when was it, Meg? 2019. It was the year before the pandemic. I think too people still remember because we were like the season that had reruns because of the pandemic.
Oh,
Right. That's actually a good point. Yeah. So we're double times famous with 13-year-olds.
I was just going to say one of the things that the two of you really exemplify and in your own personal lives as well as in your work is overcoming adversity and somehow finding joy in life. How did you arrive at that point? You could maybe, if you wanted to talk a little bit about your mom as well, but you were so
Hmm.
young when she died. What would you want to say about that?
We always say we cheated the system because there was two of us. Yeah, we
We
essentially
could be.
raised each other. It could be very different if not. Yeah, no, I think it's a very unique situation. I mean, obviously, like losing a parent when you're that age, just like truly a very pivotal time in your life when you're like growing up. Um, But yeah, I feel like Marie and I definitely like Marie said, like we like fully raised each other and we just grieve together. Like I was telling my therapist the other day, like how Marie, like I'd walk into Marie's room and be like bawling and like be in it and just need to like bawl and like need to like bawl with her. And she'd be like, no, I was there an hour ago and I just don't want to go back.
Oh,
Like it's just like inconveniently time.
right.
Um but yeah, I think it's funny. I was actually at her grave last night because she used to do this weird thing where she lit pumpkins on Halloween for her brother that
Mhm.
whose gravestone is right next to her. So I was there last night with some friends lighting some pumpkins. But I think that's also a really good example of like who she was. Yeah, like just like doing kooky things and like making the best out of situations. But we do always say that because her brother died from aplastic anemia when he was I think like later 20s, like 28 or 27, and she would have been 22 or 23. So we kind of grew up watching her grieve in a way, and like continued to grieve, even if it was 10 years or 15 years later. Um, and yeah, I just like remember having conversations with her and seeing her like openly cry and like not close doors in front of us and like just really fully embracing it. And I think that is, yeah, I think that's something that like we only kind of have discussed in the last like handful of years. But I think that like, yeah, subconsciously it was like she was teaching us before it happened. But yeah, I mean, when she passed, Marie and I both graduated high school early, went to New Zealand for 3 months. We're 18. I don't know why the principal let us graduate high school early, but they did. And yeah, traveled a bunch and did some Europe trips in her honor as well. But I think, yeah, again, I can't stress it enough how much she taught us how to grieve, I think. But
Mm.
yeah, yeah,
Marie?
totally. Well, I guess for context too, like we were 14 and she was diagnosed with liver cancer, but it spread.
Right.
And it happened very quickly. It was like 5 weeks or something, like from the time that she went to the hospital to the time that she passed. It was like boom, boom, boom. Um, yeah, we were just like little kids thinking about it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think because we had each other and because she was kind of like, not kind of, she was totally a role model when it came to like processing her emotions and her trauma and her grieving with her brother. And yeah, I feel like it just kind of like in a lot of ways, like we grew up quicker and like we kind of matured, I guess, a bit earlier. Like we always would say that we would like go hang out with our friends' parents, not have friends. Probably because we were
No.
looking for like a maternal role model.
Yeah, no,
But
like Lynn, for example,
Lynn, like literally one of our like
but a queer
probably
mama, even better.
30th mothers.
You can
But
adopt us
yeah, I don't
whenever.
know, and that's not to like I don't know, paint this like positive brush about it too. Like obviously there's been lows and like there continues to be, and it's like something that you kind of live with for the rest of your life.
Yes.
But I think that that made us realize like the value of life and obviously how quick things can happen. And I think that that's why we show up in the work that we do the way that we do, because
Mhm.
yeah, like life's too short to like not do what you want to do, and not try to make even a small stamp on the world in a positive way. Um, but yeah.
Mm,
Ah,
yeah. But I think
constantly.
there's something really special about not avoiding the hard things. And,
Mhm.
when you broke your back and then you did a film about that, that's not necessarily what everybody would have done, to actually go into, I want to know more about this. I want to honor the people who are having this experience. And it was a beautiful film. As a filmmaker, you might look back on it and cringe, but I don't. I thought it was wonderful. And it's a way to bring people's voices out into the world in a way that they wouldn't probably have been able to otherwise.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, like I appreciate you saying that, first of all. But honestly too, like film is such like, how fortunate are we to be in this sector, this type of work that we do, because it's such a vehicle to uplift other people's voices, and like the reach has so much potential, I remember like, yeah, one of this the the company that we did trading courses for, I remember our boss was like, he does like a lot of presentations and speaking to schools and obviously to the team that we had working there. But he was like, my voice only reaches so far. Like your guys's capacity to reach people is like it's like arguably like 100-fold, because it's like the way to get it out online and through films and stuff is just, yeah, it's very powerful.
I feel like
Long-winded
that's the only
answer.
thing we'd be doing actually is making documentaries if we could actually decide on it. But
But
yeah,
really just telling people stories.
yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
totally, totally.
Yeah.
And we love it. Like it's so, yeah, it's really fun too, because we always say we get to learn a little but a lot.
Right.
We find ourselves on set or on shoots sometimes and we're like, how are we here right now? This is just like wild. Like,
Yeah, I always say we did this series on women in STEM across Canada with the National Film Board, amongst other like funders, whatever. And the target demo for it was like I think like 12-year-olds or something, like little kids in school, mostly little girls.
Yeah.
And it was perfect because we were like interviewing like paleontologists and like the prairies, and, like deep sea marine biologists out west, and like all of these like incredible humans doing all this really incredible work that we knew nothing about. And it was great because like as the filmmakers, we basically had a 12-year-old mindset. We'd be like, okay, geologists like rocks. Like what are we
Mhm.
talking?
start from point A. Yeah.
Yeah. So like we like had the mindset, which is cool. But yeah.
And part of the reason women go into those careers now is because of the role models that they have. But if you don't even know
Totally.
what those role models are, because the voices aren't amplified, then
Hmm.
it's like when I came out as a lesbian, I was in my early 20s. And I had actually kind of come out as a teenager, but I didn't really actually know that that was a thing. Like I'd never heard of lesbians. I'd never heard of gay people. I just didn't know. I was in Saskatchewan. It was the 60s. And then, and so
That's
I,
crazy.
so I just kind of just ignored it because I didn't know what it was. And and then I came out and it was just like, oh, okay, of course, that makes sense, you know. But how do we know what's possible if we don't see it around us?
Totally. Well,
Yeah.
even in the work that you do, like the reach that you have too on your platforms and stuff, like it's amazing. Like,
Mm. And with the
yeah.
Radical Recovery Summit too, I've really always been interested in who's doing interesting things. And some of those people have big platforms, but a lot of them don't.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are the most interesting people to talk to and just like, what got you into the kind of work that you do, and what formed you? Like, why are you the way that you are? And
Mm-hmm.
so to have that kind of opportunity to talk to people and just to learn about the kind of work they do too, just like you were learning about the scientists. It's fascinating what people do.
It
And
is.
Totally.
Everyone's so different.
everyone's so different. And I think right now, especially too, with things so heavy in the world and so
Mm.
much violence in the world, that we really need to know that there are a lot of people that are doing really good work.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
And
just
So true.
all that other stuff. Yeah.
totally. And that's kind of related to that point. I just thought of this too, is like even like last year, whatever it was, we did a music video on this like lesbian couple. And like originally the story arc of it was like all the highs and lows and coming out and whatever, blah blah blah. And then we were like, let's just make this about like everyday queer joy. Let's just like normalize the queer relationship. They don't have to like come out or like have all these like lows or whatever. Let's just like make it normalized, you know? And more like too, that's like not just with music videos, but just like we're trying to approach that more and more and in some of our storytelling. Like we a couple years ago we made this feature length documentary on a surfing organization here in Nova Scotia that empowers and gets Black folks, mostly from the North Preston community, which is the largest and oldest Indigenous Black community in Canada, and teaches them how to surf and swim, and just like normalizing people of color even on the beach and on surfboards, and just like, and it doesn't have to be this like hardship, you know, this struggle presented to like be such. It's just like, can we just be? You know what I mean? In a lot of ways,
Mm.
which is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean that doc definitely was like dipped into the lows and the highs.
Yeah, it tipped into the lows. But I just mean like, even so the teasers and stuff, it was just like some of the interviews we had. Like I remember, yeah, one of the
Yeah,
interviews that we did, she just talked about just like Black bodies on the beach, like just
yeah,
normalize it, like it's a normal thing, like just like living her everyday life type thing. I don't know, just
yeah,
interesting to think about.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
it's a more multidimensional person, not just the one issue that you're looking at. Yeah.
Totally.
Mhm,
Yeah.
for sure.
Who would you like to do a documentary on if you had the opportunity?
You.
Elliot Page. Elliot
Elliot
Page has
Page.
been combined.
Elliot Page. Elliot
To
Page.
all the
Elliot
interview
Page.
questions. Man, honestly, some of these people at this summit, we should be talking to them. Like, yeah, we're looking for the next thing, that's for sure.
It's probably going to be queer centric though, for sure.
Yeah,
Someone who
yeah,
has a, yeah, just because that's what we're really passionate about. But it's interesting, Lynn, just a side note too. It's more and more I'm realizing like we show up at these, and by no means are we like established filmmakers. Like we're very much emerging filmmakers. But like it's interesting to show up to these film festivals or like the Screen Nova Scotia Awards or whatever, and you know, to for folks to come up to us and be like, what are you guys up to, whatever, and we're like, well, we're working on this and this, and it's all like commercial based stuff. It's like not documentary storytelling, or like the opposite, you know, if we're working on documentary projects and telling some of our clients, or if we go to these like marketing events and networking things. And it's interesting how the opposites kind of they put their nose up a little bit. They're like, they don't take us seriously if we're making commercials, because then we're not documentary
the doc
filmmakers.
world.
But then
Yeah,
it's like the opposite. It's like, oh, you do doc, then you don't know how to work with kind of the corporate world. It's like interesting. And more and more, I feel like there's a blend, like filmmakers, storytellers, directors, etc. Like they're there's a world where you're kind of dabbling with both. And yeah, it's just interesting how those, because we do enjoy doing both. But I mean, storytelling, no matter what, that's like our bread and butter, what we love to do.
Even on the corporate level, it's people that are in the corporations.
Totally.
And, a lot of the stories that you're working with there are about real people.
Yeah, exactly.
When you think about the business that you're in, like it's not that many people, especially your age, who are able to make a living doing the kind of work that you enjoy doing. So how would people perhaps get into this as a business? Like you had a certain route through doing kind of a pair of commercials and commercial work and documentary work. But how would young people or anybody really who wants to express themselves this way, are there some pathways, are there opportunities, or is it pretty limited?
No, honestly, YouTube. Anytime someone's like, should I go to film school? I'm like, go on the YouTube Academy, homie. YouTube it up. I feel like anything like YouTube wise, honestly, like my friend is getting it. I mean, my friend has been like painting for years, but like just learning some new techniques and like pushing yourself out there on like social media and like website stuff and just learning how to like market herself through the internet, like just understanding that. And yeah, Marie and I mean, we never went to film school or any of that. We did marketing degrees, which like I'm sure were helpful in terms of like understanding the foundation of promoting yourself. But ultimately everything that we've done has been, or everything that we've learned was through trial and error and YouTube, honestly. Just looking up things and constant learning. Like I'm on YouTube, I follow like I don't know, 50 different filmmakers and that post like tutorials and stuff. And I'm on it once a week, just learning. And I think it's like a passion thing. Like we're just like both obsessed with it. I think that there is like, if you talk to anybody when it comes to filmmaking, it's either self-taught or Meaghan jokes, the YouTube Academy, or it's film school. And I don't think, I mean, it depends on the person. I think there's pros and cons to both. I think film school is really expensive, but it also probably, leads to more connections and networks. And also, if you're not, I guess, that great at motivating yourself to like learn on your own, that could also do it. But I think more and more these days, we are seeing people completely self-taught and just learning by doing, like starting out as a production assistant and just going on set and just like absorbing as much information as humanly possible. I think a lot of people learn online, and I also think like cameras and stuff are more accessible these days. By no means are they cheap, but they're cheaper than they were. And I think with the rise of obviously like social media and TikTok and Instagram and whatnot, it's become more popular and more known, I guess. So I think we're going to see a huge influx of creators, like we already are, like compared to 5 years ago, which is great because it's like the more the merrier, and it pushes people, and competition's good. But yeah, I would say, yeah, just getting on set as a production assistant, just starting that way, or learning, like looking up some tutorials, buying a used camera, and shooting on your iPhone. Like you can, there's the capacity, the quality is great these days. So I would also say too, like even listening to you talk about that, I think like in the beginning we didn't have like egos around our work because it was like very, very, very basic and junior, and like was it work? I don't know. In the same way that Marie's like cringing thinking about the old documentaries that we made. But I think that in the beginning, Marie and I were both just like so. I remember we were in this film and TV class in grade 10, and we like made this like weird music video with these old cameras on this weird editing software. But
weird.
We were so obsessed with it, and it wasn't about the grade or anything. It was just totally creative, and like there was no project scope really. Like the teacher was really open and fluid, and was very open minded and didn't limit the creativity at all.
And we were obsessed with that, the two of us. And then we started making travel videos and stuff. And we were equally obsessed with that because we were just doing it for fun. And like the creative process of like making clips, like just like simple cuts way back then. And I think what's funny is like we kind of lost that. I mean, we did lose it, I think. And then it became, about impact and storytelling, but it was more of like we weren't doing anything for ourselves. And I think that that's why the documentary side is really fun for us, because it's like we have full control, depending on like what producers we're working with. And we were the producers, so like we had complete control. But it's funny now, Marie and I are doing, yeah, we've basically just been like, okay, we're doing well financially. We're gonna do passion projects, and we're gonna do some stuff that we actually want to do that's gonna get us more work down the road. So we've done like a couple spec ads where like, there's like little to no money involved, and we're paying people out of pocket, and we're doing fun stuff that we're like super jazzed about. And I think it's interesting because like in the beginning, that's how people get into this industry, and then you kind of get sucked in, and then you're too busy, and then you kind of, it's not that you resent it, but like sometimes we'll be on vacation, or we'll be at a special moment with her mom or like whatever, and then she'll be like, oh, I wish I brought my camera, but like she won't bring the camera because it's like it's the job, right? It's like even if it's fun what we do, it's just like we want to close it, but then we're like, I don't know, we're like limiting our like we're like like not doing it for the reasons that we first started doing it for. Does that make sense? So Marie and I are coming back to that kind of in this like organic way, I would say now, and just like being like, yeah, let's do this because this is cool, and this person is super cool, and these visuals would be incredible. And then we just like nerd out, and like, Marie with this recent spec kind of commercial thing that we've been working on this climber. Yeah, Marie spent like how many weeks, Marie, on the pre-pro? Like Marie was just like diving into all the things, and it's like, yeah, that's where the spark was. And so getting back to that is important.
I think if you talk to any creator, any entrepreneur, it's like you start maybe as with the passion, for something, and then over time, because money is involved and it does become kind of your job, you kind of lose some of that. But it's a good, yeah, it's to be reminded every so often, like why you got into it in the first place, and try to still fuel that is important.
So you mentioned the last 5 years, there's been a big influx of people doing this kind of creative work. Why do you think that is?
Because I think it's more
Accessibility.
accessible.
Yeah.
It's more accessible, and a lot of people are creating their own, again, personal content just for fun on Instagram or TikTok. Meg and I started like really, like Meaghan mentioned the music video, but like we started shooting and editing videos because we did this backpacking trip to New Zealand a few years after mom died. And we were there for 3 months, and my dad was like, I want to see videos. And we were like, nah. We were like little brats. And anyways, he like snuck like a dinky little point and shoot video camera in our bags and was just like, shoot with this. And this was before Instagram, this was way before TikTok. Like Facebook was popular, but like I don't even think you could post videos on Facebook at that time. Like we were posting them to YouTube, and they were getting traction on YouTube, which was funny, but it was like mostly just us shooting and editing these clips of our trip so Dad could see it. And then that's when we realized we got into it. But like more and more these days, it's like people are doing that because it's a thing, right? On people's Instagram or their TikToks or whatever.
Right.
So I think that's why it's becoming more popular genuinely. And because it's more accessible with cameras being cheaper, and yeah, like basically any camera these days shoots 4K, like high quality resolution. And editing platforms are also more accessible and more affordable, which is great.
One of the things that I always think about when I think about the two of you is your enthusiasm. And how do you approach, like I've seen the magic happen when I've been around you doing this, but how would you talk about that in terms of when you do a documentary or a series on something? Do people just relax around you? What are your thoughts about that?
I think first thing comes to mind is like the work that we do, though it can be stressful sometimes, it is not life or death. And to recognize that for the most part, we are working with real people, real locations, real stories. And like, we are sitting in front of a human. Like, you know, if you're going into an interview, like this is a human that we're not, you know, it's, and trying to relate on that level and just like kind of take things not too seriously. You know, interviews, like some, like, God, we must have done like, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000 interviews to date. Like we started our company 2015. So we've obviously, with experience and practice and stuff, we've gotten really good at making people feel comfortable and stuff. Um, but yeah, I think like the first thing that came to mind when you asked that question was just trying to like, just remember that you're working with an everyday person and just trying to make them feel comfortable. And obviously they're in the hot seat for a reason, and their story matters, that their, you know, their voice needs to be heard. Um, and trying to connect with them as a person rather than a subject first, I guess.
Yeah, and because we are mostly doing social environmental impact stuff, it's like the people that are sitting in front of us that we're filming are actually, like Marie said, interesting people. Like they have something to say, and I think it genuinely comes from curiosity. Because you know, some of the crew, like recently, or even like, yeah, one of the people that work with us is like, yeah, said the other day, I was like, you guys are just so, like, when you interview people, you're so interested and invested, and you can tell. And it's because like we're not doing boring corporate videos, like we're talking to like, again, like super interesting people, and I genuinely want to know. And sometimes I'm like asking questions and it's not even like, I know it's not going to make it in the edit, and I'm just like genuinely curious, because kind of like what we were talking about earlier with you, then like it's, I don't know, people are just so different and interesting.
Yeah,
I just
I
want to
think though,
know.
I think even if it was a boring corporate video though, like I think, yeah, like I definitely agree with what you're saying, Mike, but also just like, again, just like, yeah, relating to that person on a human level. And it, you know what, it actually comes back to mom, I think, because mom was so, like when she died, like I, to this day, people still say like, you know, I might not remember certain memories of your mom or whatever, because it's been over, I don't know, 15 years now, but like people will remember how she made them feel. And I think that that's something that we have kind of learned and taken on through her, and like showing up consistently when you interact with people. Like obviously like
Mhm.
there's bad days and stuff, and you know, again, things get stressful, but like, yeah, it's just like showing up consistently who we are with anybody, whether they're interesting or not.
Yeah.
I think we learned that through mom. Like mom was totally, she totally embodied that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
just making people laugh. I don't know. Marie and I can get like, you know, it's hard because it's like our baby, so we can get like, we can take it really seriously, and because we are both Capricorns, we're just like, it's like kind of life and
The
death sometimes,
disease.
and we're like, and then we remember like this is actually not life and death. Like this is actually a creative, like incredible, powerful thing that we do. Um, so we need to remind ourselves. But I think, I know there's some, like the other day we had a shoot and I just like walked in the room and it's a bunch of like, it was like for a politician, and she's wicked, but like her team, like it's just a bunch of like dudes, and I walk in, I'm like walking in like this, like I just want to like bring in some funk, you know, like bring in some energy. And I think it's like, I don't know, it is a good point, Marie, like you talking about mom. I think that like, yeah, the way that people talk about mom and the impact that mom had on us, I think that yeah, I like definitely aspire to like, I don't know, make people laugh a little bit more.
Totally.
Or loosen up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is such a
Me too.
gift right now, especially because so many people are polarized and
Yeah.
not seeing the humanity of other people. So it's like
Mhm.
those people over there, they're wrong, they're scary, they need to change somehow. And I think that's a good description of what you do. You really come in and you work with somebody as a person. Years ago, seeing a quote from Oprah said, every single person she's ever interviewed just wanted to be seen.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
totally. I love
Isn't that
that.
the truth? Oh my
I
God.
know. It's funny too, like when people sit down, I mean, as you can imagine, you get all different personalities. Like some people want the questions in advance. Some people do not want the questions in advance. Some people do not sleep the whole night before. Some
Yeah.
people are like shaking, and some people are like, I don't want to do this, or like, I'm interested. Like you just, everybody is so different. And then with people that are nervous or just like overthinking or like whatever, fair enough. You have to be vulnerable in front of a camera and know that that's like a definite thing that's going to exist and you can't manipulate it or change it necessarily. Um, yeah, I always get people to sit down, and when people are nervous, I'm like, listen, you're gonna be laughing. By the end of this, you're gonna be like, that was it. And then it always happens.
It always
Always.
happens.
No, I think usually at the end of it, people are like, okay, that was good.
Yeah, the other thing is that I think too, because like I said, like it's sometimes on set I have to remind myself, or sometimes when I'm working, I have to remind myself that it's not life or death. But I think too, being so close to death, like literally, witnessing our mom pass away when we were super young, and then also, almost dying, literally fracturing my neck. I think like being so close to death has, in a way, taught me lightness and like again, like everyday joy. And that shows up in the work that we do. And I think that's why, yeah, we're able to be kind of like loosey goosey, even when things do get stressful, because we have been closer to death. I know that's intense to say, but it's very true.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think sometimes either people go into kind of a depth of depression or shutdown or anger or something when that's your circumstance, or you do what you two have done and just really go into a depth of aliveness and joy and a bigger perspective.
Mhm.
Like you said, it's life's too short. I don't want to waste it. I want to do something that's really meaningful, and
Totally.
fun. So going into something a little bit more serious for a minute, Me Too, Time's Up. What's the situation in terms of your world and what you're doing? You mentioned, filmmaking is very male dominated. Um, what are your thoughts about that in the industry as it is right now?
I feel like we have a lot of power, which is really cool because not that we have a lot of power. I mean, we're still a small production company, but I think it's really badass that we show up on set, like Marie said. People are just assuming a crew to show up, they don't know. And then it's just like a bunch of us, mostly women, mostly non binary, mostly queer. And I think the more people, the more diversity you have behind the camera, it changes what's in front of it. Um, Yeah, I think it can be super discouraging. I'm not gonna lie. Like we've had a few different meetings in the last like couple months that have just basically been like, yeah, aside from like the Me Too movement, obviously. I mean, it's related. It's like sexism is obviously at its core, but I think that we've had a few conversations where it's just like men that aren't like necessarily taking us seriously. I don't know. I think like you said, Lynn, like the world is really divided and everything is like just coming out in this more like bold way. Like you're seeing these stories online a lot more on social media. And I think that like consuming that, I don't know, it can get a little bit depressing for sure. But I think,
Mhm.
having each other is incredible and having like a crew and squad that is amazing. And,
Right.
even like my partner, Carolina, working as photographer on set too, like we have such an incredible crew that shows up and also like to have each other, to have like a partner that is a photographer, to have Marie as my life business partner and my twin, like
Mm.
it's yeah, like the other day I had a call and I was like, oh Marie, these guys like made me feel like I felt like, you know I'm like less than. And Marie's like, fuck them, like who cares what they say, we're doing our own thing and it's working, like who cares. The point that I was saying was being surrounded by support networks is incredibly important. And also, I love the idea of us like, I love when I hear the client or someone just being like, "Oh my god, you guys literally are showing up. Did not expect this." Um, and the importance of that.
It is a male dominated industry, the film world, of course, something we know. But for us, like I think that was in a lot of ways, like it ended up working out because we just created the opportunity for ourselves and started our own production company. Like we weren't gonna start as production assistants or like
Mhm.
the bottom of the hierarchy, the bottom, you know, and we were just going to work our way up and take the crap and whatever. And not to say that every woman does, but I think we saw it as an opportunity to start our own company and to pave the way as we wanted to, and to hire folks like us, and to also work with clients that are women led, queer led. Like, that's the goal. So then when we're on these calls and whatever, it's like, yeah, it's like we're fortunate in a way because we haven't really experienced like any level of intense discrimination, but for sure we get belittled.
There's been a few different situations that have been like extremely traumatic, honestly, that like there's people, there's predators that are involved with crews that we're dealing with, like multiple people. And then like as women, even though we're directors, we're the ones that have to sit down with them. Like there's been some like really, really intense stuff. I noticed that like the moment that we started outsourcing more people, it's like more humans, more complexities. You know, get messages from people like, oh, don't work with that person because they are actually an abuser. And I'm like, okay, I get 3 of these messages, so this is a red flag. And that's why we only work with women and non-binary.
Honestly, Lynn, honestly.
Not that women and non-binary people can't be abusers either, but like, holy crap, I'm like, I'm here for it.
So when Meaghan calls me the other day and it's like, I felt like I was, you know, like I belittled or whatever, like we were called kids or whatever the stupid comment was made. It's like, Meg, let's stay in our lane, because it's like I don't want to work with this dude running this company anyways. Like, you know what I mean? If that's like the initial call, like what's gonna come out of that if we choose to work with them. But yeah, no, it is a good point, Meg. Like we have run into a couple very sticky situations that we've had to get our way out.
Literally.
But for the most part, like it's like I said, just like creating our own opportunity and hiring women and non-binary folks and queer folks, because this industry really needs it.
And so you're creating this container where people can be themselves, where people aren't being harassed, where you don't have to, like, you might have to deal with that as the people who are going for funding and for projects and stuff. But once you've got that organized, then within your container, it's a very healthy environment. That must feel really good to be providing that for other people too.
Totally.
And it manifests itself. Yeah, like it's amazing.
And it's cool because like there are some younger folks that we work with that like they're just, you know, getting into film in the last couple of years, like recently graduated or whatever, and so they're having this experience with us, and then that will set the standard for them. And we do work with like men as well, and like, you know, we have a couple guys that we work with on set, and they're incredible, and like they're just like so progressive and amazing and accepting, and like deal with all of our weird dykey jokes, and it's just the best.
It's interesting that what you said too, one of you said about this is now the culture that younger folks are taking into their next jobs.
Yeah.
So if you're treated with respect and you know that that's a possibility, and have a good connection with the people, everybody's being treated as a human being. So you don't just do that with the people you interview. Obviously, you do that with everybody that you're connecting with.
100%. Yeah. Being consistent. That's like my number one goal in life, is to like consistently be myself and consistently show up for people in a positive light too. Like, again, like, you know, we have been talking about like, you know, resilience and like overcoming trauma and joy and positivity and whatnot. That's not to say again that like there isn't the dark side of that, but, you know, really trying to make light of the situation and show up for people.
There's a privilege of being able to listen to your intuition and act on it. And I think when you were talking about the Me Too movement and everything, I think Marie is really good at this. I'm getting better at this, but there's an intuition sometimes with certain conversations with different potential clients or funders or producers or whatever, people in power, where Marie will text me when we're on the call or call me after and be like, no. And I'll be like, come on, blah, blah, like, let's just give it a try. And she's like, my intuition is, it's an absolute no. And there is nothing we need to do. We do not need to prove ourselves to anyone. We do not need to stick to this gig. We are saying no. And obviously that comes from a power of privilege in the situation that we are in with this production company and like being successful already. I think when you're coming out of it, you don't necessarily have that privilege to be like, no, you're just kind of like doing the thing. But I think it's really important to listen to your intuition. Like that is the most important thing, because usually it's right. Like honestly, these few situations that I had to deal with that like we would definitely not dive into around like abusers and stuff in the industry, like I had intuition and I was just like, I won't get into it, but it basically was like this really incredible project and there was, funders and blah blah, and it was complex and there were people above me, so I wasn't able to make those like decisions coming from the top. And if I had just listened to my intuition, I probably just wouldn't have done it and wouldn't have dealt with it and wouldn't have had to deal with the trauma that it created with, a lot of different people involved in that project.
It really has a long-term impact on us when we're in a situation where we're being traumatized and we can't get out of it. So
Yeah.
the fact that you can say no, or you can also, I mean, I think it is very helpful that the two of you are really on the same page and you really have each other's back and you support each other. And that makes a big difference. But you two really do. I mean, you really care about each other and you want the best for each other and for the company, and to be able to continue to do this work it is a great privilege, and it's something that you've really earned and worked for.
We're constantly dealing with different people, working with different people, and Maria will be like, that was weird. Like what he said was weird. And so like I'm not down. And I'll be like, okay, you're so right. Like I feel like this relief,
Yeah.
or like also on set, like we work with crews and like our crews are trusting us to kind of like protect them when we show up on set.
Do you have hope that things are going to turn out well in the world?
I have hope. Otherwise we're doomed. I don't think there's any other way to look at it besides try to be somewhat hopeful and also try to like, try to make your small stamp on the world, if it's small or big, like, right, we all have a responsibility to provide some of that hope. Yeah, totally. I keep saying lately to friends, I'm like, isn't it weird, like mostly I'm talking about like evil powerful people like Donald Trump. And I'm like, isn't it weird that like Donald Trump was a baby? Like everybody was a baby. Like we were, if you just like look at someone and you're like pissed off at them or they say something inappropriate or whatever, just like, I don't know, if you think about people as babies and just like we're all so traumatized in such different ways. I mean, I think like for me to answer that question, I feel hopeful because of the amount of incredible people like you that exist in the world that are like 100% teaching people how to directly, deal with their trauma or talk about their trauma for the first time or whatever. I think that there's so much more tools out there to like address and educate yourself on like how to address the trauma, which is really cool. But I also think that we also are in the egocentric, crazy capitalistic world.
It is interesting thinking about it all coming down to trauma though, because I know the book called The Myth of Normal. It's taken me so long to read it. I know it came out a long ago. Like it's a 500-page book. I'm obsessed with it. I'm getting through it. But my point is like it all comes down to people being traumatized. And like if we could all look internally and try to heal our wounds, like that's number one. And which is again coming back to you, Lynn, why the work that you do is so profound, because it is literally the starting grounds of healing this whole world and becoming more hopeful.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's part of what makes my work so meaningful for me is that I really feel like I'm contributing something in terms of healing the world and healing myself at the same time, obviously.
Totally.
And part of the work that you do too is the projects that you do, you're really interviewing people who are making a difference and who are engaged in making the world better somehow. And then you also are doing that in your own life and as employers and in your production company. That's pretty cool. That you can do.
I'll never forget one interview we did on this feature length film that we made on social entrepreneurship. One of the social entrepreneurs that we interviewed was talking about how like all the world's problems is actually, it's so simple. It's obvious. It's like an opportunity for so many jobs, so many career paths. Because like there's obviously a means of trying to help alleviate it or solve that issue, right? So I love that. And I think filmmaking is a vehicle for that. I think obviously the work that you do is a vehicle for that. I think, yeah, there's tons of opportunities out there.
Well, it's also just so cool, like how accessible it is these days, like video and just like people sharing stories and seeing themselves on socials, even though it's like, I don't know, kind of doomsday to like be on social media and be on your phone all the time. But like, it's incredible how like TikTok just cracks me so hard with the algorithm of like queer filmmaker. I'm just like, it's such a niche. And just seeing queer people in this way that's so normalized on my feed, it's just like, it's so validating. And yeah, I love it. And just, yeah, having access, like the next generation having such quick access to like share their stories and like access those role models online. Yeah, it definitely gives me hope for sure.
Yeah, me too. And I, as someone who's older, I really value the courage that younger people are showing too. And just looking at beyond the gender binary, people your age, but also people younger than you, teenagers and early 20s are, it's like a lot of the binary doesn't even exist for them.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Like as they go through their life and they don't have that kind of label or that gender binary in the same way. It's like the pieces are falling into place for me as a non-binary person, but it's not something that I kind of had to have ever taken for granted. It's something I felt inside, but now the world is starting to reflect something that feels true to me. And I'm excited that people don't have to wait until they're older in order to have that whole shift. We can really open up to that now. It's awesome. Yeah.
Totally. We literally just did a little mini course that's online for free right now called Beyond the Binary. And it was a bunch of like incredible people telling their stories. And like, it's I think it was for legal aid in Nova Scotia, but it's a tool that exists online for free for different
workplaces,
organizations. Yeah. And that was so fun to like chat with different people and just like so much joy. A lot of it was mostly joy centered, which was like, again, kind of like coming back to what we've been talking about this whole time.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you make about that, like in your life right now and kind of recognizing some of that. There's so many things like online or people online that I follow, and it's just like even just like coming down to being flat chested, it's like, what? Yes, I've wanted that my whole life. Like, obviously, I've like, binders and stuff. I've learned about it over the years, but like, it's just so interesting. I just thought I was like in my head about it all my life. And it's just like, oh, wow, there's thousands of people that feel that way.
Yeah,
and like, fortunately for social media and stuff and just like online presence. And again, more queer people coming to the limelight, like, it's really validating.
What's the best way for people to see some of your work?
Website and Instagram mostly.
No, I'm just really grateful for you and for having us on. Seriously. And I cannot wait to watch all of these talks.
I know.
Yeah, it's really fun. Yeah.
I
really appreciate the two of you coming on as well. And
thanks again, Lynn. That was fun.
This is Lynn Fraser. Join us for the 2024 Radical Recovery Summit, January 12th to 21st. RadicalRecoverySummit.com.